There's a 2-year-old comment on a 2-year-old video on this channel. The comment was posted under the argument against the concept of religious liberty. That is, insofar as religion allows an American citizen to break the law, to break whatever law they want. If you haven't seen that video, the link is down below in the description. To state the obvious, if you never saw that video, but you're about to watch this one, this is going to seem like a waste of time, so make sure you watch that one first if you intend to continue watching this one. The comment in question was posted by him. We'll just call him Graf. Graf begins by saying, "I have several objections to this video. Full disclosure, I referenced your late night journalism video and thought it was excellent." I'm not sure that's a full disclosure, but that's something. Again, this is referencing another video on this channel, an opinion piece entitled Late Night Journalism. If you haven't seen that video, it would also be worth it to watch it before continuing watching this video, since Graf references it. If you have seen both of these videos, you're good. Stay put. Let us now check out Graf's counterarguments. Each point that he makes begins with a timestamp. 1 minute, 31 seconds into the video in question, Graf writes, "The background music was not playing during the speech, yet you used a snuck-in attempt at humor on the CNN banner, ostensibly to detract from Huckabee's argument. Considering the points in your late night journalism video, I object to that." Now, just for the sake of context, in case you haven't seen the video that Graf is referencing here, and just as well, there's a link to that down below. The thesis of this video, the thesis of this opinion piece against late night journalism, it was an objection to late night talk shows prioritizing entertainment value over the facts, to put it as simply as possible. In other words, it's a higher priority for these late night talk shows to cover the news in a way which is amusing first and substantive second. It's more important that their coverage is funny than accurate. That was what was being argued against in that video. So Graf apparently thinks that the same thing that was criticized in this opinion piece against late night shows is the same thing that this channel did in regards to this religious liberty argument. Which, that's not fair, because if you watch the videos on this channel, you'll find plenty of jokes and gags and humor sprinkled throughout, but the jokes are not made at the expense of the arguments, or the facts, or the reality of the situation at hand. So it's difficult to humor Graf's points. The background music was not playing during the speech. Well, obviously.
We will not surrender to the tyranny of one branch of government.
Obviously, Two Steps from Hell was not actually playing at this Christian rally in Kentucky, yet you used a snuck-in attempted humor. Come on, I thought it was funny. Yet you used a snuck-in attempted humor on the CNN banner to detract from Huckabee's argument. This doesn't make sense. How the hell does doctoring the CNN banner to read "this background music is freaking epic" detract from Mike Huckabee's argument? How does one thing cause the other? That would be like saying you made a peanut butter sandwich to cause a traffic jam. There just seems to be no connection whatsoever between the one thing and the other. Look, there's nothing inherently wrong about making attempts at humor, just as long as the argument being made is addressed. And in this case, it was addressed. So let's move on to Graf's second point here. Okay, 2 minutes and 30 seconds in. Simple. This is really common in YouTube comments. This looks like it was supposed to be a real-time response to something that was said in the video. In other words, if Graf was in the room when I said what I said in the video and he had the ability to interrupt me and say what he wrote here, and this is so annoying. Why do people have to do this? Can't you just write your rebuttal? But it's so common for people to write their comments as if they are responding in real time to the person speaking in the video. It doesn't make any sense. So let's play the part of the video that Graf is responding to here. How did we go from a lone county clerk willing to disobey the law because of a personal objection to sacrificing an entire country to tyranny? Okay, to that, Graf says, simple. The fact that the specific language of the First Amendment guaranteeing freedom to practice religion was ignored by the Supreme Court, and frankly, by your analysis. Now, this is kind of frustrating because, as you can see, we are precisely 2.5 minutes into a 16 friggin' minute long video. The argument hasn't even gotten started yet. We haven't even gotten to the analysis, and Graf is already grumbling about something being ignored by the analysis. We haven't even gotten to it yet. Not to mention, and this really does go without saying, but I'll say it anyway, the question that Graf is answering here was rhetorical. It was just to set up the rest of the video, so this really was a complete waste of characters, and we're moving on now to the third point. At 4 minutes and 39 seconds, he says, at issue is the actual definition of marriage, which arguably predates government. Considering marriage's ties to religion, you are ignoring, here we go again with the ignoring charge, you are ignoring that any redefinition of said institution impacts religion. It impacts religion. We'll get back to that. And thus has consequences for it that brings in First Amendment protections. Now, that's not much of an argument. Graf is claiming that a legal redefining of marriage, a legal redefining of marriage has an impact on religion. Just religion, not religious institutions, not religious followers, not religious practices. Religion. That's pretty darn vague. It's not quite clear what Graf means by this. How does a legal redefining of marriage in a secular republic, quote-unquote, impact, quote-unquote, religion? It just seems like yet another non sequitur, like when he insisted that this stupid little Easter egg detracted from Huckabee's argument. Again, if you make a peanut butter sandwich, you'll cause a traffic jam. The language here is just too vague. Graf can insist that a legal redefining of marriage impacts religion, but if he doesn't actually describe in detail how that is so, then there really is not an opportunity to challenge this argument in the first place. So, moving on, at 5 minutes and 34 seconds, he says, I agree, but you are... Okay, here we go again. He's responding as if he was responding in real time. Here is the clip of the video that he's responding to. Congress passes a law that legalizes gay marriage at a federal level. Would Governor Huckabee be satisfied? Actually, no, he probably wouldn't be satisfied. At that point, he would probably wave his magic wand to throw out that law and then argue for states' rights. Okay, to that, Graf says, I agree, but you are now using he probably would as a logical argument. If you are being honest, you can only evaluate what he actually did argue. Yes, the word probably was used in this argument, but it's also true that Mike Huckabee's actual arguments were evaluated. This is yet another annoying criticism. What Graf is saying should have been done is exactly what was done. Huckabee's actual arguments were addressed. So, again, I guess there doesn't seem to be anything to say beyond that. So, the next point at 6 minutes and 22 seconds in, I honestly can't believe that you would make this sort of statement. Okay, let's play the clip that he's responding to. Is Mike Huckabee finally satisfied? Is this the point where he turns to Kim Davis and says, "You're on your own," as he plays the Star-Spangled Banner on the bass? To this, Graf is saying, I honestly can't believe that you would make this sort of statement given your late-night journalism stances. The parallels are simply striking. No, they are not. The thesis of the late-night journalism opinion piece was opposed to people making jokes at the expense of a decent counter-argument. Yeah, this is a joke about Mike Huckabee slapping the bass guitar, but his arguments are still countered. It's very flattering that Graf seems to have really enjoyed this late-night journalism video, but the poor guy doesn't seem to have a grasp on what the thesis of it was. It seems like, in his mind, anytime there's a joke, any attempted humor whatsoever, that is in violation of the counter-argument being made. No, you can be funny and challenge somebody's argument. You can do both. It's stating the obvious, but apparently sometimes you need to do that. It's 6 minutes and 57 seconds in. Please notice that none of his arguments, he's referring to Governor Huckabee here, please notice that none of his arguments were that gay marriage should not be allowed, but that people should have the freedom to follow their religious beliefs as guaranteed in the Constitution. Right. Huckabee never argued that gay marriage should not be allowed, full stop. He argued that gay marriage should not be allowed via the Supreme Court, and then via Congress, and then via the states. He kept making different arguments against gay marriage. That was the issue being dealt with here. He kept making one of a handful of different arguments against legalizing gay marriage. And, you really can only spell this out in plain English and put it on the bulletin board. If it still goes over somebody's head, what can you do? What can you do? At 9 minutes and 46 seconds in, equating religious freedom with simply allowing someone to break traffic laws is apples and oranges. You're better than that. Well, thank you. That's very flattering. As well as self-evident. If you keep watching this part of the video for another 30 seconds or so, it is plainly acknowledged that driving is not in the Constitution. This bit about traffic laws was just meant to be a framing device. It was just meant to demonstrate, how ridiculous it would be if somebody tried to get out of a traffic ticket by saying they had an objection. But obviously driving is not in the Constitution. It's not in the Constitution. We don't have a right to drive. It was just a framing device. It was just a way to lead into the next part of the video. So obviously, Graf makes a good point here, but he's not giving the video due credit. 10 minutes and 38 seconds in. When it comes to religious freedom cases in the past, the concept of greater burden has been used when pitting rights versus rights. The greater burden in the case of Kim Davis was placed upon her, violating her religious freedom, as there was a workaround, allowing her staff to certify a gay marriage, which is the eventual solution. Furthermore, your examples of Charlie Manson and Mola Ram, that's R-A-M, etc., no, those were the only two examples, are exceptionally clear in illustrating a hostility to your subject matter. No, there was no hostility. The only reason that Charlie Manson and Mola Ram were referenced was because they're both familiar faces, first of all, and second of all, it was just to illustrate the line of reasoning being used. It wasn't to be mean or anything. Sorry if it was. It was just to get the point across. Sorry if that was offensive. Sorry, not sorry, whatever. As for Graf's points about Kim Davis, it's becoming a greater and greater pain in the butt that Graf is not taking into account the fact that Kim Davis was a county clerk. That's the key aspect in this particular incident, and Graf hasn't brought it up once. He just keeps banging on about how we have a right to follow our beliefs, goddammit, but that's not the issue here. The issue was that she violated the law. If Graf is just going to ignore that part, he cannot, and he so far has not, made a convincing counterargument. As you can see, he links to a rather well-written article here, but we're going to stay focused on what Graf himself actually said. Pressing on to the next point, at 11 minutes and 53 seconds in, you are ignoring or prohibiting the free exercise thereof on the grounds of a technicality that you then use to invalidate religious liberty. Why? Simply because government passes a law. Simply because government passes a law. That is a gross mischaracterization of religious liberty, and you know it. General rule of thumb, if you interpret a part of the Constitution in such a way that either negates the entire concept of it in the first place, or the remainder of the Constitution, you are interpreting it incorrectly. Where to begin? First of all, the part of the First Amendment that reads prohibiting the free exercise thereof was not ignored. If you watch this part of the video, you'll see that the text in question was acknowledged and the text itself was highlighted. Secondly, Graf claims that this text was ignored on the grounds of a technicality. On the grounds of a technicality, in regards to the admittedly ridiculous example of the law allowing people to sacrifice virgins in a country with absolute religious freedom. That's not a technicality. That's a fundamental problem. That is a fundamental problem with the idea of absolute religious liberty. That's the argument that Graf should have at least made an attempt to challenge, but instead he just blows it off, referring to it as a technicality used to invalidate religious liberty. And that brings us to the third hiccup here. There was no attempt made to completely invalidate religious liberty. This extreme example of virgin sacrifice wasn't used to invalidate religious liberty outright. It was used to illustrate why religious laws should not trump secular laws whenever the two clash. That's not the same thing as throwing the whole concept completely out the window. And lastly, this use of the word simply. Simply because government passes a law. That's a big deal, man. That's a big deal. Government passing a law is a big damn deal. Graf can tack the word simply on the front end of that if he wishes, but that doesn't make it a smaller deal. If the government passes a law that says you cannot sacrifice virgins to make it rain in California, you either think that the secular law trumps the religious law, or vice versa. And if Graf thinks that religious laws should trump secular laws, he needs to make an argument as to why religious laws should trump secular laws. But he doesn't do that. He just belittles the argument made on this channel, referring to various aspects as technicalities or simple, or incorrectly assuming that religious liberty was being invalidated, which it wasn't. It was just being scrutinized. So that's just straw manning. I mean, this is mighty frustrating. At 12 minutes and 56 seconds, Graf says, "No, that was the purpose of the..." Okay, we need to. We're going to play the clip that he's referring to here, and then get back to his response. Don't you think the Founding Fathers would have noticed the irony of the supreme law allowing citizens to ignore the law? Don't you think that's just a little counterproductive? The entire point of having laws is to maintain a civilized society. To this, Graf says, "No, that was the purpose of the Declaration of Independence, to illustrate plainly when governmental authorities misuse their power. A balance is needed in all things." And this video ignores that balance. Here we go again with Graf insisting that something is being ignored. And whatever it is in this case is anyone's guess. The point that Graf is rebutting here is that the Founding Fathers would not have seen fit for the supreme law of the land, which is the Constitution, not the Declaration, to allow people to abstain from the law if they have a religious belief. That was the point that Graf was rebutting, but he responds to that by bringing up the Declaration of Independence, which was the justification for the American Revolutionary War. What does that have to do with? I'm not sure where he's going with this. I just don't know. A balance is needed in all things, and this video ignores what balance? I mean, I could take a guess. I think I know what he means, but I don't want to guess. I wish he would have just spelled it out in more detail. Again, I don't understand. It's not clear why Graf was citing the Declaration of Independence when disagreeing with a point about the Constitution. So, unfortunately, maybe he was onto something here. You know, maybe there was a reasonable argument that he was making here, but because his language was too vague, it's just not clear what kind of an argument he was trying to make here. 13 minutes and 20 seconds in 2004, Gavin Newsom, then California governor, did exactly that when he illegally issued marriage licenses to thousands of gay couples. He was not charged for any violation. This was a key reason why there was outrage at Kim Davis being jailed. Not impeached, but jailed, when she did the same thing. Now, that right there is a double standard. There's no disputing that. That is a double standard. But it is not a counter-argument. The fact that a California governor pulled the same stunt that Kim Davis pulled, just in the opposite political direction, and was not punished, doesn't take anything away from the argument that was made on this channel. It's a fair point in and of itself, but it doesn't counter the argument that was made on this channel. So, good point, but at the same time, what's your point? I'm too disappointed in your analysis here to bother going any further. And this is long enough already. I like you counter-arguments, but in my humble opinion, you have been very hypocritical in this video. Well, hopefully it was demonstrated as early as in the first 2 minutes of this video that nothing hypocritical happened in this argument. Graf put a lot of effort into the actual writing of this comment, even if he admittedly got tired and stopped before completing the argument, and even if a lot of his points missed the mark, it still seemed worthy of a response. So here it is, and hopefully this satisfies. Hopefully this satisfies all of his concerns. While we're focused on this particular argument on the channel, this is as good a time as any to let you know that this video is not monetized, and the reason why is because of a copyright claim at the at the end of the video. For those of you who have seen this video, you know that there's a wacky little mashup at the end, and the music used in it was claimed.
Tyranny. I think we gather here today to say we will not.
Now, this particular video is one of the longest on the channel. It took a long time to make. It took a lot of effort, and it's currently earning no revenue because of this stupid gag at the end, which was fun to make and I think is funny, but it is nevertheless frustrating that it's making no profit just because of a bunch of bagpipes playing underneath of Huckabee and Kim Davis giving their speeches. So I'm considering, well, not considering, I've already decided that I'm going to re-upload this video without that clip at the end, so it can be monetized. Not to mention, doing so will also provide an opportunity to clean up some of the audio, fix some of the audio levels, make any small amendments to the production of it. Being a perfectionist, that's very attractive. Hopefully, you're not too frustrated with the notion of re-uploading video, because this is something that's happened quite a bit on this channel, and some people get annoyed with it, and for reasons which are understandable, but hopefully in this case the reason why this video is going to be re-uploaded, the reasons why, hopefully they are understandable to you, and hopefully it can result in some people seeing it that wouldn't have seen it if it just remained on the channel as it was, and as it currently is, a 2-year-old video. So that's just a quick update. Thank you for sitting through all of this this podcast-like video on this channel. Thank you to Graf, however the hell you pronounce this. It's not even his real name, obviously. So we're just calling him Graf. Thank you to Graf for typing this very long response. Minus 10 points, though, for getting too tired before getting to the end of the video. That's not cool, man. Come on. You did all that work. You were so close to bringing it home. Come on, man. Come on, Graf. Nevertheless, thank you to Graf for his thoughts and his counter-arguments, and hopefully the counter-arguments to his counter-arguments were impressive. This is the end. Well, it's never really the end of the video until there is an attempt at humor.
Look at this ground.